Hey, welcome back to the Guillemot Kayaks Workshop. I'm Nick Schade and I'm continuing to work on the microBootlegger Sport strip-built sea kayak. I'm in the part of the build where it's a bunch of little things to do between watching glue dry. I also have a lot of stuff to do today, and so I'm probably going to end up combining what I'm working on today with some of what I'm working on tomorrow. It'll be things like getting another layer of glass on the seat, working some more around the cockpit area, and so it's a bunch of little things, and again, watching glue dry. So I'll peck away at these things, talk about what I'm doing, and see how far we get. So when I installed the skeg box, I had it stick through, and I have the bottom is closed off here. The reason being, I want to make sure that this maintains the right width. If I didn't have that spacer in there, when I went to fit it in, it would be very likely that the sides here would get pinched in a little bit. So at this point, I want to cut it off flush and start to blend it into the bottom of the boat. So I'm just going to use Japanese pull saw and run right along the surface and start cutting it off. Now that it's cut nearly flush, I'll just make it completely flush by grinding it down with a sander. Now I'll just round over these edges a little bit. So on the bottom side of the seat, I used S-glass, 2 layers of S-glass. On the top side, I'm going to use regular E-glass. Like I said with the deck and hull, the E-glass wets out clearer, but the S-glass is stronger. I wanted as much strength as I could get on this, so I put the S-glass on the outside. I will do the E-glass on the inside just to have it look as good as possible. Again, I'm going to lay this out in a bit of a bias angle. So again, with the bias angle, the weave goes this way and that way, and so that helps it conform to the curvature of the seat. And so that'll lay down nicely. I'll mix up a standard batch of epoxy and wet it out. I didn't bother heating up the whole shop in order to do this fiberglassing, but it does pay to have everything warm. So by using the heat gun, I can get the part I'm working on warmed up, and that'll help the epoxy flow out, and it lowers the viscosity and helps suck the resin into the layup. So now give it another heat treatment, help drive the bubbles out. Any trapped air will be driven out as the epoxy's viscosity gets lowered and the air in the bubbles expands, flow to the surface and pop. Like the other side, this is a very hard surface to do the standard grunge cupping on to get rid of the excess resin. So I've got a couple paper towels here, and I'm going to use that to soak up any excess. That looks good. The control cable from the skeg is going to run from the skeg box up to the control slot inside a polyethylene tube. And I want to get that, make sure that tube stays out of the way. If anybody's shoving bags down into the back of the kayak, make sure it just doesn't sag down and get in the way. This is where the front of the skeg box is. It'll come up to the deck along here and then in behind the cheek plate. So I have these little padeyes that I'm going to use for holding that in place. I would just want to make sure those are well glued down. So another quick sanding, just scuff up that surface a little bit. And so I'm just going to epoxy those down. I made these out of some carbon fiber a few years ago. I made a bunch of extras. I added a little bit of fumed silica and milled fiber to the epoxy. Make it stay in place and a little bit stronger. And lead weight as a clamp. And this one we'll put an actual clamp on. So that's all I can get to today. We'll continue tomorrow with a little bit more similar sort of stuff. Right now I've got a meeting, and then I'm going to go join the Tuesday night paddle, and then I'm going to go join the opening night, and then I'm going to go to the opening day of the Tuesday night paddle group here in southeastern Connecticut. We'll be paddling out Esker Point and have a little picnic after. So we had a good turnout for the Tuesday night paddle last night. It was beautiful weather and a nice picnic afterwards. So I could have done this process before I glassed the bottom, but I decided it was easier to glass the bottom and use this process to trim off the fiberglass. So what I'm doing is right now the bottom of these feet are straight across. So they're perfect flat surface like that. And the bottom of the actual kayak is shallow V. So is going to be that shape and that shape coming in. And I want these feet to fit flush down onto the bottom of the boat. So I need to contour these a little bit to match the bottom of the boat. There's a variety of different ways I could do this. I could make a little template of the bottom, basically one of those cradle forms I've got, and lay that on there, see what needs to be carved away, then use my block plane to carve down. So just plane away at this surface to make a contour that matches my template. That's a pretty easy way. If I have trouble getting that perfect, plane it down close and then put some sandpaper down on the bottom of the boat and then just run the seat back and forth until it's a perfect fit and peel the sandpaper off and be good. But I have a CNC machine. I paid a lot of money for this. I need to justify it, so I'm going to use my CNC machine to contour the bottom. What I found to be one of the hardest things with the CNC machine is figuring out how to hold the work I'm working on to the table. The router generates a huge amount of force and it wants to fling things all over the place. And something like this seat, it's very hard to clamp it down. There's just no flat surface. So what I've done is I've created basically a butt print. Nice butt print here. That's the negative shape of the interior of the seat. So when I put this on here, it fits down there nice and snug. It's supported, so forces that I'm putting on the seat aren't ending up going through the thin walls of the wood, especially before I fiberglass it. If I don't have these reinforced, they're fairly delicate, and trying to clamp this down to fight against the force of the router is tricky. But now with this butt print, I can put it down there. The whole surface is well supported, and now it's a matter of holding it down to that supporting surface. My sort of standard way of clamping things is just to take some scraps of wood and essentially just screw them into the spoil board and use those as clamps to hold everything in place. Need long enough screws. They bite into the spoil board. That didn't bite in too much, but that actually generates pretty good downforce on that. So now I figured out how to clamp it down. I'm going to unclamp it because I need to zero everything out, and I want to run a test pass on this before I end up cutting everything. I've put a lot of work into this seat. I'm trying to make the seat really thin, but I don't want it so thin that light shines through. I'm going to zero it out to the bottom here, then unclamp it, run the program with the seat not in place, and make sure the router bit does not get too close to my butt print here. So we'll zero it out to the bottom of this first. I also want to zero it out to this corner, just make sure everything's good there. Now I'll unclamp it and do a dry run. So now I'll run that tool path with the router turned off and just see if it ends up coming too close to the seat there. Yeah, that's going to cut down into the butt plate. So I need to double check my zeroing here. So it's very close, but it's not going to hit. If it doesn't hit here, it's not going to hit anywhere. So we will put the seat back on, and I'm going to re-zero it again just to make sure everything's copacetic, and go from there. And we'll try and contain this dust, which makes for a more boring video, but I want the dust contained. So that's taking the bottom down, and I want this seat to be as low in the boat as possible, keep the center of gravity down and the stability up. So I've actually carved away a little bit at the bottom, but I've got plenty of thickness left there. And now that'll be a perfect match to the bottom of the boat. Nicely contoured, very shallow V. So I want to get a little bit of glass on this and give the whole thing a fill coat. So now that I got this bottom of the seat contoured, I just want to ease the edges here with some sandpaper. I did notice you see a little bit of delamination along this edge where the router was coming in and just sort of lifted that edge of the fiberglass. I'm pretty sure I can get epoxy to soak back down in there. When I go to fiberglass this, I'll first warm everything up, paint some epoxy on there, and that's usually, if the material's warm enough, that's usually enough to get the epoxy to soak down into something like that. So I have that on both sides here. It does not go this way. I assume that's just the way the bit was spinning, caused tear out on this side, but not on that side. So I'm just gonna hit that with the sandpaper. This is 120, I'm gonna throw some coarser grit on that. I'm just trying to get rid of some of the overlapping texture here from where the edges of the glass was cut. The fill coat will start to bury it as well. It's all sanded out. I'm ready to do some glassing on it. I'm first going to just cut some pieces of glass to do the patches I need. Looks like I can get some good stuff out of here. And I want to lay the pieces on the bias. We'll see, that might be bigger than I need. So once again, a little bit of heat to warm up the surface because I haven't heated up the shop. Here's where I had a little bit of the delamination due to the cutting, so I'm going to make sure those spots are particularly nice and warm. So once again, the heat lowers the viscosity of the resin and makes it so it seeps into things easier. And also by letting it cool down, any air trapped in the wood sucks in and draws the epoxy deeper into the cracks and anything that might need to be filled. So once this is nice and warm, I'll paint on some epoxy. See if we can zoom in on the delaminated area. And again, what we're looking at is this sort of lighter color right along the edge. That's where the fiberglass is sort of peeled away from the surface of the wood. So you can see the epoxy starting to run into that area there. Just rubbing it to sort of get the pressure to help suck stuff in. Yeah, it's done a pretty decent job there. A couple spots back here. All right, now I'll give the whole surface a coating. Once again, I've got the thing up on a yogurt cup to just keep it off the workbench. I was going to glass both sides at once, or I was going to fill coat both sides, top and bottom at once. But once I got thinking about contouring here, I decided, okay, let's go ahead and get some glass on the contoured area for extra strength, especially back here where it's a little bit thinner. Now that I've cut that contour back. All right, fill coat on there. Now let's see about the glass. I don't know that I'll be able to get this to wrap around that back of the foot there. We'll see. Some tight radiuses there. I think I'm going to take and trim this off at the front. That's too much for it back there. And now I'll use the heat gun to pop some bubbles. So I need to make a backrest. It's going to be something like this. This only shows part of it, sort of half of it. Typically what I do is I have vertical chunks running this way or vertically, and then the top and bottom has a border of different contrasting woods around it. I didn't do that much with contrasting woods on the boat, so I think what I'm just going to end up doing is put some pinstripes in it. I have a piece of veneer here that I cut myself, Alaskan yellow cedar, about a 1/16 thick, that I had on hand. I also found this up in my attic. This is glued up chunk of western red cedar, about 2.5 inches thick, about 12 inches wide. So I'm thinking that can make up this center piece. And then I've got another piece of western red cedar here. I'm going to put that on the top and bottom with the veneer in between. So dark, light, dark, light, dark. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. So I'm going to take and rip my big blank here into 2 3/4, then rip a couple pieces off this western red cedar at the thickness, 2.5 inches thick. I guess while I'm at it, I'll rip the veneer down to 2.5 inches wide as well, and then glue it all together. I'll start by just squaring up one end and then rip it to width. I have a chop saw, but it's up in the attic because I don't use it that much. When I do need it, I bring it down, but it's not worth going up there to just cut these to length. It's a much bigger blank than I need. I'll get several out of it and have some spares. I've got a little bit of epoxy left over from glassing the sink. Not quite enough to do the job here, I don't think. So I'll just mix up a little bit more, then add some Cabosil to that to glue these parts together. I could use yellow carpenter's glue. This is going to get glassed when it's done, so it doesn't need to be a waterproof glue. But I have this on hand, just about ready to go, so that's what I'm going to use. All right, that'll do for that. So that's about it for this episode. Everything I have to work on is either gluing up, sticky, or hasn't been delivered yet. So I'll stop and start editing this video down, see if it makes any sense, and if it does, give me a like. The more people that subscribe and like these videos, the more people I'll get subscribing and liking these videos. And the more people that like these videos, the more support I'll be able to get for producing these videos. So everything you do to comment, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, etc. help support these videos. For the hardcore that want to see the videos a little bit early, head over to Patreon. I post the videos there a week or so before they're available for the general public. So until the next episode, thanks for watching and happy paddling.